I joined the CIA 32 years ago. Well, I've been security guard now for the Queen for 20, 25 years. Amazing woman, Liz. What a cook. Well, I started running my international company from the age of 6. I'm an IT manager. But my book? You mean this book here?
Yes.
Well, this is my debut novel, and it's called Forestium: The Mirror Never Lies. It's book 1 in a series of books. The series is called Portalis. Book 1 plays out in a heavily forested environment, and the idea is that each new book in the series, you have the same protagonists and antagonists embarking on their adventure, but from book to book to book, they immerse themselves in a different world. So book 1 is all about forests, hence the name Forestium. Book 2 is all about desert islands, and that book is going to be called Archipelago. The main character of the book is Joshua. He's the main protagonist, and Joshua has reached the age of 17, which is the age of decision, the age at which he can become a true woodsman if he completes the trials. So Joshua has been having these dreams about his father. Now, all we know about his father is that he went off to do battle many years ago, back when there were lots of tribal feuds taking place in Forestium, and he never returned, so he's presumed dead. But Joshua's dreams are telling him otherwise. And so he's now convinced that he's seen his father, but not just seen his father, he's seen his father in great pain and suffering. And so this is an itch that he just has to scratch. And so he sets off into the magical world of Forestium with his best friend and a couple of other people that they meet along the way, and they try to find the truth about his father. And along the way he collects a number of magical artifacts, and he starts to do battle with the main evil character of the book. Our antagonist is a guy called the Goat, who is evil personified. And so Joshua and his friends are collecting these magical artifacts, and the Goat can't have any of this. He's fiercely jealous of all magic and all power, and so he wants to prevent Joshua from reaching his goal of obtaining all the magical orbs needed to open up this gateway, which is the Portalis. And the gateway, this Portalis gateway, is a gateway into the underworld. The characters don't know this yet. We're going to learn this as we go throughout the books. And so essentially the story is a fight between good and evil, and Joshua's battle to find the truth about his father and to open this Portalis, which he needs to do because he believes, or he's been told by the Oracle, that that's where he can go to find his father. And so it's a very, very tense book. There's lots of twists and turns, and what happens at the very end is, well, we have the Raytheon, we have the Wood Boar, there's the evil Bloodbat, which is one of the dark creatures of the underworld. We have the Razorfin, which is one of the, it's a type of fish, and there's one part of the story where the protagonists have to overcome an obstacle, and these fish are going to become, trying not to give too much away, a bit of a challenge for them. I do have some great art in my book, don't I? It's amazing. Did I do it myself? Oh, I wish. I'm not nearly that talented. I found a Romanian artist to do the front cover of the book, and I gave her a very, very, very detailed brief of exactly what I wanted the cover to look like. I had it in my mind's eye very, very clearly. The artist did a very, very good job in framing the scene on the front cover. So for example, on the front cover there's an image of Joshua, our main protagonist, and he is actually that's not the same person's head as it is the person's body. She stitched one head onto a different body. She even went out of her way to arrange for a photo shoot with a local reenactment society to get that pose. I wanted the pose of the camera looking over Joshua's shoulder as he's holding the mirror of prophecy and the image of the goat is staring back at him. A lot of people ask me this question, and it's a very difficult question to answer. But it all started when a very good friend of mine, I won't say who, you know who I'm talking about, she came over to my house and we spoke about me wanting to create a book, and we looked at the various elements that we wanted to have in the book, you know, magic and different types of creatures and certain types of characters and various things like that. And the idea just sort of flowed naturally from that initial brainstorming session. Most of the plot and the storyline and just everything else about the book largely came from thin air. Did I use any real-world locations for my world? No, I didn't. Everything was conjured up out of nothingness. There is one or two things in the book and in the story that are derived from real world. So for example, the wood boar. Do we have a wood boar? This is a wood boar. And if you've ever seen the movie Princess Bride, you might recognize this from the ROUS, Rodents of Unusual Size. That was the inspiration for a wood boar. I have a brother who is somewhat sarcastic and belligerent, and in the book there's a character who's somewhat sarcastic and belligerent, completely coincidental. I don't know that there's any specific life experiences that I've drawn on. I'm sure there are, but it's difficult to nail down. I don't think I set out to specifically draw upon a particular life experience. I think anybody that does writing, they naturally draw on their own experiences as a matter of course, whether or not they're doing that consciously or not. But there are some, it's worked the other way around. So I've written, for example, one of the characters, Sarah, to be a very strong, independent, resourceful, clever young woman. And one of the reasons I did that is because I want my daughter to be a strong, independent, resourceful young woman. And so it's kind of the opposite way around, if anything. I really like Galleon because he is so sarcastic. He knows just what to say at the right time and never misses a beat. Joshua, I've got a soft spot for Joshua. He's the main character. He's probably more like me than anything else. I see myself more in Joshua than I do in the other characters, but I really like Sarah as well. Of course, the goat is evil personified, is an absolutely malicious, vicious creature, and I really enjoyed writing him. I think we should keep an eye on what's happening between Sarah and Joshua. Sarah quickly became Joshua's romantic interest in book 1, and that is going to develop in some of the later books, so keep an eye on those. So the 4 main characters that are going to survive from book to book to book are Joshua, Andrew, Galleon and Sarah, and of course the goat. We might see 1 or 2 of the other minor players pop up from time to time. I don't want to give too much away, but if I were the reader, I might keep half an eye out on the metamorphs. My school visits. Yes, I've done a number of these school visits since becoming an author. So I contacted all the local schools and said, I'd like to come and talk to your students, or I'm available to come and talk to your students, thinking nobody would respond, but a lot of schools did, and they've taken me up on the offer, and I've been visiting schools almost every week since. So I generally go into a school and sit down and speak to anywhere from 40 to 250 children at a time. It's been a lot of fun. They're very, very interactive. Kids have got a thirst for knowledge and wanting to understand the whole process about being an author and publishing a book. I personally get a lot out of it myself. I don't go into the school with the intention of selling books. That's not my main purpose. If I sell some books, that's incidental and that's great. But I really go to see the lights in the kids' eyes light up and that enthusiasm. And when you're talking to them about something that's happening in your book, or about being an author, and they're sitting there and they're looking up at you with, their jaw dropped and their eyes wide, and that you've got them, and you know that they're really going to be inspired by what you have to say, and that gives me a tremendous sense of internal pleasure, that I can be, in some small way, the inspiration for the next Dickens or Roald Dahl. I'd have to say it's the interaction with fans and readers. I spent about an hour online today on Facebook on an author takeover party, and I got to interact with a whole load of people that were enthusiastic about wanting to know more about my book and my stories and the Portalis series. There's nothing quite so satisfying as interacting with a fan and listening to their enthusiasm for something that you've created, which is really, really good. I get a lot out of that. The publishing process. Well, there's two different paths you could take as an author. You can go traditional or trad, or you can go independent or indie. So I've chosen the independent path. Traditional publishing involves contacting an agent. They sell your book or manuscript to a publishing house. Some time elapses and then maybe your book becomes published. The agent takes a cut, the publishing house takes a cut, and you're left with a few pennies at the end of the day. Now, if you're like me and you are game to dip your toes into the water and try things yourself, and you've got some the energy to do your own marketing and your own publicity and things like that, then the independent route may be the way to go, which is the way I've gone. And so it's hard work. There's a lot involved. I used to think that the hardest part about creating a novel was doing the writing. And then I thought, well, actually, no, that's quite easy. The hardest part is getting it edited and getting something that's worth publishing. And then I thought, no, the hardest part is actually getting it published. I now actually think the hardest part of the whole thing is all the marketing and everything that happens after the fact. So the impetus, the writing, the drafts, the beta reading, everything else that is involved in creating a book. Yes, it's hard work, but it's really after you've got the book and you want to try to get it under people's noses and sell it. That's the hard part. This is where a traditional publisher comes in and they do all that for you, but that's what you pay them for. So now I've got the option to sell books as if I can, and if I sell any books, I get to retain all the profits. And that's the big difference between traditional versus indie. I decided to write a book because I wanted to exploit my talents some more. I thought to myself, I could write well. I've done lots of blogs and journal writing and travel writing and things like that, but I've never actually done any commercially published works. And I thought to myself, well, I've got this skill, this ability to write well. How can I turn that to my advantage? So I thought to myself, I know, I'll write a novel. It's always been on my bucket list and I've never done it before. And so I thought I'd write a novel. But before I wrote a novel, I decided to test the waters first and wrote a short story. And that short story involved a young 10-year-old boy called Joshua. And that's actually where I got the name for Joshua, from the protagonist from Forestium and the Portalis books. The short story went very well. I engaged a writing tutor to help me along the way. Got to the point where I decided, this is working. I'm actually able to do this. And so that gave me enough of a confidence boost to tackle a full-length novel. So that's what I did. And I wrote Forestium. Yes, I've had a number of near-death experiences, unfortunately. Some of them were a bit more interesting than others. There was a time in the Okavango Delta when I got charged by an angry bull elephant, narrowly escaped with my life. We were caught in a coup in Ecuador during a military coup. We were having fun in our backpackers hostel, and we heard what we've just assumed to be fireworks going off, and we thought, well, it's been a long day, we'll just spend the night in. It turns out that was gunfire. We moved from South Africa into Swaziland during the height of Desert Storm, and we were surrounded by an angry mob of youngsters who were not too impressed with the fact that there was an American war going on, and we were white people and therefore American in their eyes, and we were cornered, as it were, so that was quite tense. There was this time when we went scuba diving in the Andaman Sea, just off the coast of Thailand, and I went down to photograph a moray eel. And the scuba divers that had gone down previously were in the habit of tying pieces of meat to the side of their camera so that they could get the eel to come out so they could get a good shot of the camera, but nobody told me this. And so I went down there, got to depth, found this hole where the eel lived, went up fairly close to get a photograph of it, and the eel had obviously associated photography equipment or scuba divers with a food source and came out looking for some food. I didn't know that was what was happening, and I just assumed the eel was going to come out and attack me, and so I desperately tried to get out of the way. Interestingly, that was the incident that is the inspiration for one of the animals that's going to feature in Archipelago, a vicious eel called the Manoana. So look out for that when it comes out. But I've had lots of other near-death experiences as well. We were in South Africa, the Kruger National Park, when we had stopped the car to witness a troop of baboons that were just walking across the road. And suddenly all the baboons start going very, very wild and agitated. And off to my left, I saw a lioness stroll out. We had since stopped the car and turned the ignition off with the windows down so we could get the camera lens out of the door to take some good photos. And not 5 meters over here, through the open window, the lioness had cornered one of the baby baboons in an acacia tree, a small acacia tree. And the lioness proceeded to climb up the tree to try to catch the baboon. And then when that happened, a second lioness came out and sat down at the base of the tree, waiting for the baby baboon to be scared and shaken out of the tree. Well, this second lioness was quite a bit closer to us, probably no more than 3 meters from where we were. And the lioness is looking around, keeping an eye on the baboons, and suddenly it stares directly in my face. Now, at this point, I'm going to nearly soil myself. So this lioness is 2 or 3 meters away from my car. The engine is off and the windows are down. So I slowly put my hand to the button at the door to raise the window, and it wasn't moving because the ignition was off. And I sat there petrified for 3 hours. Now, during the course of the 3 hours, about 30 seconds have actually passed, but it felt like 3 hours. And the lioness that was in the tree actually ended up capturing the baboon and jumps down with the baboon in its mouth. And another baboon came running over, presumably the mother of the captured baboon, and the second lioness lunged and grabbed that lioness. And so both lionesses then just walked off into the bush, each with a limp baboon hanging out of their mouth. And that could so easily have been us, because I couldn't get the window open because the ignition was off, and I couldn't get my thoughts together to remember that that's where the ignition key is to turn the car on so I could get the windows up. That was quite tense. We were in a high-rise building in China, in a place called Datung. It's about 5 hours journey west of Beijing by train. And we were in a high-rise building. It was a hostel or a hotel. I think we were on the 9th floor, and there was an earthquake, and the whole building tremored for about 30 seconds. So it was quite a big tremor. And I remember thinking at the time, gee, I wonder what Chinese building codes are like and whether or not this building is going to survive. Let's hold on and find out. Fortunately, the building didn't collapse. There was another time we almost died. That was the tsunami in Thailand. We were there just 3 days before the tsunami hit. We had decided to leave and go to Australia as part of our backpacking tour around the world. Had we stayed just 3 days longer, we would have gotten caught up in that tsunami. And we stayed in a place called Khao Lak, which is on the southwest of Thailand. And we found out after the fact that Khao Lak was pretty much razed to the ground after the tsunami. So we got very, very lucky there. There's another example of where I nearly lost my life. We were quad biking on the dunes in Namibia. And I'd somehow conned the organizer into giving me the very, very powerful quad bike. And he said to me, don't go driving off in any direction because, you know, overnight eddies, wind eddies form and big holes can appear, bus-sized holes that can appear that not even we as the guides know exist, and so you don't want to accidentally fall into one of those. but you can drive around on this sort of open plain area. And so I thought, great, I'll spend some time driving around on this open plain area. Now, he felt the open plain area was just this part here, but in my mind, the open plain area was that big part over there. So off I went at about 40, 50 kilometers an hour on my quad bike and started to rise up what looked like a gentle hill and got some really good speed up. And then the next thing I know, the guide came in from my right and forced me to stop abruptly. And it was a good job that he did, because had I gone 5 or 10 meters further, I would have disappeared over what was to me an invisible precipice, which is about 30 meters deep, and it would probably have killed myself. Sandy doesn't know about that. Don't say anything. Yes, I've traveled quite a bit. I grew up in England. I left England when I was 20, I think, and I spent 8 years in Holland. And then we went from Holland to Florida for 7 years. And then we spent 2 years backpacking, traveling around the world. And then we went back to England for a few years. And then in 2009, we came to Australia. I visited about 43 countries, if memory serves, about 13 US states. You want to know which ones, don't you? Let's see, I've been to England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, Belgium, Germany, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, France, Spain, Italy. I think that's all the European, oh no, I've been to Monaco. And then we've been to India, Hong Kong, China, Australia, New Zealand, Cambodia. Didn't get to Laos. We did go to Thailand twice. We've been to Tahiti, Easter Island, Chile, Ecuador, the Galapagos Islands, been to Mexico, we've been to Africa, we've been to South Africa, Swaziland, Namibia, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Kenya. We went to Egypt, Dubai, Jordan. I spent about 3 months in a camper van traveling around the British Isles. That was fun. I've lived and worked in 3 countries across 4 continents. The only continent I've not been to is Antarctica. I haven't been to Russia. I'd love to go to Russia. I actually had Russian language lessons with the intention to travel to Russia, but we never got there. We did have language lessons for Chinese, when we to prepare for our trip to China, because China was one of those countries on our world's destination of countries that we were going to travel to, where we knew that communication was going to be difficult because they didn't speak English and we didn't speak Chinese. And so I took some Chinese lessons, and I remember my teacher asking me if I could say, I would like to buy some flowers for my wife, and didn't quite get the intonation correctly, it's a tonal language, and I ended up saying, I would like to sell my wife, which turned out to be a very useful thing to learn how to say after all anyway. Well, it made the interpreter laugh at least. Sadie wasn't laughing. I love children. Never for breakfast, and of course I couldn't eat a whole one if I tried. But no, I do like children. I engage well with children. I do a lot of author visits to schools and interact with kids. I'm kind of a big kid myself. We went on a camping trip recently with a number of neighbours to somewhere nearby, and there were 19 kids there, 20 if you include me, of course. And I spent most of the time just entertaining the kids, so it was a lot of fun. I was very bright, but a very awkward child. I had undiagnosed mild autism when I was 5 years old, and that made for a very unsettled childhood. I was generally a happy child, but I had some issues. So that was school. School was a very interesting time for me. I loved primary school. Absolutely the best years of my life. I really, really enjoyed it. It was carefree, had a very loving environment, was very bright, was always doing very, very well at school, didn't have to try very hard, loved it. And then I became a teenager and went secondary school. That was a little bit more, shall we say, unsettled. Didn't really enjoy secondary school as much, if I'm honest, but I eventually progressed, survived, endured secondary school and went to tertiary education, and I thrived. I did really, really well there. I did technical college, and then I did sixth form college for my A-levels, and I really, really enjoyed school after. I enjoyed school generally, but the bit in the middle, not so much. Why should people read my book? Because it's the best book ever. It's better than Harry Potter books. My God, it's so much better than Harry Potter books. J.K. Rowling has got nothing on me. It is the most amazing fantasy adventure novel for young adults that you'll ever read. People just don't know that yet. Forestium is a wonderful book. It ends on a bit of a cliffhanger, and which sets us up for book 2, Archipelago. Book 2 is going to be even better than book 1, and I've got big plans for the whole series. So if you want a story that's going to survive and grow with you, stick around. There's lots of stuff to come in the Portales series.